Nyangche chenpor zordan hingme jang zongner monum chenpor ngab gyabda bakar dar ngam zando sharmardo. Tumba tuje jang la ki sham zara, jan rawar teringi jang gamsa, jan hurtu ji shan la yelar, jime banzo jang lang soran.
The answer past profound and wonderful dharmas, difficulty encountering billions of aeons. I now see it, here to receive and uphold it, a vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning, to liberate all beings, let's generate the supreme bodhicitta. Now let us continue with our class on the Surangama Sutra. I believe during this class, you must have had some kind of insight, some kind of gain in terms of your spiritual development. This particular sutra was given by the Buddha at the age of 62. And this is a teaching that could enlighten the sentient beings. It's a method that could bring the supreme realization to the sentient beings. Many great masters, in fact, by relying on this sutra, they had attained the great fruition. Though we are sentient beings living in the dark age, with the 5 degenerations, our virtuous roots and our capacity cannot compare to that of the past masters. But I think if we have faith, we will definitely also have various levels of gains and realizations. A great numbers of masters of the past attained realization by reading and studying the Surangama Sutra. For example, there was once a Zen master who lived around Hangzhou area. His name is Master Huanshen, and he got ordained at a very young age. After he grew up, he started studying Zen Buddhism and as well as the Tiantai school. He specifically spent a long time in studying and research into the Surangama Sutra. At the beginning of his study, he felt that the teaching is quite difficult to understand, but he kept going. Until there was one night when he was studying the Surangama Sutra, and he fell asleep while reading the book. And then he dreamt the sun disk in his dream. He dreamt that sun disk start to dawn from the sky, and then Master Huanshen opened up his mouth and swallowed the sun disk. When he woke up the second day, he then attained realization. And later, the Zen Master Yunming, when he was, then the Zen Master Yunming later went to him to seek for validation for his level of realization. At the time of his time of death, he also manifested various kinds of signs of taking rebirth in Pure Land. So I think by reading those stories, we see that great masters in the past, by relying on the Surangama Sutra, they had attained realization. I can go on and go on about the stories of those masters. I believe all of us who are studying this sutra, we also have accumulated a great numbers of merits. Therefore, by relying on our faith and a sense of respect, when we're reading the Surangama Sutra, I believe each and every one of us will attain some new insights and some new realization. But I do need to remind you, if you don't spend enough time after studying the class, then after a few years or after a short period of time, you will feel that the teaching become quite foreign to you again. And then you won't be able to give teachings on it or take the insights within. So I encourage you to spend more time on the studying of this sutra. If we were to spend a long time to study each word and each sentence very clearly, especially when you're young, if you were to put lots of diligence in the study of it, then later on you will definitely be able to give the teaching of it, especially if you have faith, especially if you are diligent. But if you, after studying right away, put it on your bookshelf and never look at it again, in the second year, majority of those words and contents will become quite foreign to you. So whenever we have this opportunity, we should seize it and then let go of all the other worldly chores, only focus on this study. Now let's continue. We've already studied the 10 ways of the seeing nature, the 10 pointing out instructions given by the Buddha. This is according to great numbers of the Zen masters' textual outline and analysis. Today we will also talk about how to break the false view and recognize the true mind. Now Ananda said to the Buddha, "World-honored one, it is still not clear in my mind what the Buddha, the world-honored one, has explained for me and for others like me about causes and conditions, spontaneity and characteristic of mixing and uniting, and the absence of mixing and uniting. And now to hear further, to see seeing is not seeing as yet another layer of confusion." Ananda, being a Shravaka practitioner, he posed this question to the Buddha on behalf of all the Shravaka practitioners in that assembly. He's saying that, look at us, we still have questions. Same as us, I think we still have so much grasping towards solidity, and we still have so much attachments. In this way, the Buddha would naturally be very kind to all of us and then would give us teachings on the causes and conditions and the spontaneity. Yesterday, in fact, the Buddha had already covered on the mixing and uniting and the spontaneity and causes and conditions. According to the right lineage commentary of Surangama Sutra, where it says that the mixing and uniting is connected to causes and conditions, the not mixing and uniting is connected to spontaneity. This is from a different angle than what had been taught in the previous part of the teaching. But then Ananda said that, well, world-honored one, it is still not clear in my mind. After we've covered the part on the seeing is not separate, on especially the part where the Buddha said that when you see your seeing, the seeing is not seen to be seen, since the former seeing is beyond the latter and the latter cannot reach it. When such kind of teaching was expounded, Ananda got quite confused. And then Ananda said that now after hearing further, that has to see seeing is not seeing as yet another layer of confusion to all of us. Ananda told the Buddha saying that, oh, it's very confusing for me. At this time, when it comes to the seeing is not seeing, adds on to another layer of confusion. Because we were confused before, but now the Buddha has expounded this more profound teaching to all of us, we're just getting more confused. Ananda, in fact, from his wisdom, from contemplation and wisdom of listening, in fact, he has lots of supreme capacity in that sense. However, when it comes to the actual practice, he still lacks the wisdom that's generated from the actual practice. Therefore, he had to keep seeking, keep on asking these questions. So sometimes I think to myself, Ananda at times appeared to be someone who had not attained liberation and who's very close to the Buddha. It is said that when the Buddha was 55 years of age, Ananda started to become his attendant. Because at the beginning, Ananda didn't want to be the Buddha's attendant. Because Ananda was the cousin of the Buddha. So he felt that he doesn't want to cause all kinds of difficulties within the Sangha, therefore he didn't want to take up that role. But later, with the elders in the assembly and lots of noble ones asked of him to become the attendant of the Buddha, therefore he did. And he has great wisdom and he has a very good memory. We can say that he has this transcendental memory. Therefore, he kept the teachings of the Buddha. Between 55 years of age to 81 years of age of the Buddha, in about 25 years of time, Ananda was the attendant of the Buddha. And because Ananda's supreme memory and being very close to the Buddha, lots of the sutras were later on transcribed and written down because of the memory. And before Ananda, there were other Sangha members who used to be attendants, and the situation was not as favorable as when Ananda was being the attendant. So in some of the situations, though Ananda appeared to be rather not very smart or had lots of confusion, lots of misunderstanding, lots of questions. But exactly because of that, he kept on asking questions to the Buddha. Sometimes I think that if Ananda already attained liberation at that very time, then he wouldn't further ask questions to the Buddha, and then the Buddha won't expound the teaching. Because many great masters in the history, if there are disciples who are very good at asking questions, who are very good at compiling the teachings of the teacher, and very good at preserving the teaching of the teacher, they would definitely be able to contribute to the activity of the teacher. Of course, that is on the basis that they do not have any selfish intentions and hidden agendas. If they work wholeheartedly to benefit sentient beings and wholeheartedly to preserve the teacher's activity and wisdom, then they would definitely be able to preserve the wealth of spirituality to the future generation. Therefore, I think Ananda may have already attained liberation, except that he had to ask questions in front of the Buddha again and again, and sometimes appear to be that he understands only half of the teaching, but not completely. Therefore, he had to ask questions again and again. In this way, he would be able to get more teachings. Also, Ananda has a great wisdom in dealing with all kinds of people. He has great interpersonal relationship with people who are at a superior status than him, or of the same, or of a lower So I definitely think that Ananda has great wisdom that surpassed that of the others. And sometimes this kinds of wisdom would manifest in the way that maybe he appears to be foolish and have less wisdom. In this way, he would be able to reveal the treasure out of the wisdom of the Buddha. So he kept on asking the Buddha, kept on requesting the Buddha to expound further. Ananda said that, humbly, I hope that with your vast compassion you will bestow upon us the great wisdom eye, so as to show us the bright, pure, enlightened mind. And after he said that, he wept, made obeisance, and waited to receive the holy instruction. After speaking this to the Buddha, Ananda started to weep and then at the same time prostrate to the Buddha and asking the Buddha, requesting teachings from the Buddha, saying that, please, great compassionate one, may I receive the noble teaching, this sacred teaching from you. We are waiting to receive the holy instructions. In the ancient Chinese cultural context, usually the holy instructions are from the emperors, but over here, this holy instruction specifically points to the dharmic instructions that's sacred. Ananda at that time appeared to be really saddened, just like how a child crying for the mother's milk. The mother would, out of compassion, give the most supreme and most wonderful Dharma milk bestow to Ananda and the great assembly. After such a request, then the world-honored one, out of pity for Ananda and the great assembly, began to explain extensively the wonderful path of cultivation of all samadhis of the great Dharani. After receiving the request from Ananda, then out of the Buddha's great compassion, he expounded the teaching to Ananda and the great assembly on the wonderful path of cultivation of all samadhis of the great Dharani. In the later part of the teaching, we will then see more of explicit explanation on it. But right now, the great Dharani is the teaching of the great truth. Dharani has the meaning of the one that upholds, or has also the meaning of mantra. But over here, this Dharani doesn't only point to mantra. Because Dharani could mean that there's the one word Dharani, many words Dharani. The one word Dharani, such as the mantra of Ah, and then the many words Dharani, and then the Dharani without words, which is the absolute teaching of Prajna Paramita. The samadhis are the samadhis such as the Surangama Samadhi. In some commentaries, it says that there are the samadhis of eye faculty, and then the dharanis of ear faculty, of nose faculty, of tongue faculty, of the body faculty, and of consciousness, all the way to the form and object samadhi, and then to the sound, color, or sound and form, and the smell and touch and taste, as well as Dhamma Samadhi, the consciousness Samadhi. So all the way from the eye consciousness to the mind consciousness and the 6 domains Samadhi. So altogether, there are 25 types of Dharma included in this wonderful path of cultivation. And later we will study the 55 types of wonderful path of cultivation. In fact, the Buddha will be expounding on the emptiness, on samadhi, on practice, on the 6 paramitas, and tens of thousands of activities. Because Ananda's sadness and weeping, the Buddha then started to expound the teachings to the great assembly, maybe because the weeping of Ananda really touched the Buddha and fitted into the Buddha's sacred meaning. During the study of Surangama Sutra, we should understand it is because of the Buddha's great compassion and because of the supplication of Ananda. That's how we are able to receive this teaching. Ananda indeed have bestowed great kindness to the later practitioners like us. Without his supplication to the Buddha, then we will not be able to receive such supreme teachings. We should definitely have this mind of gratitude to the Buddha because he had given such supreme teachings to the sentient beings of the 6 realms. We should also have the same gratitude to Ananda because he manifested in such ways, sometimes sadness, sometimes confusion, sometimes weeping, all kinds of ways that touches the mind, touches the sacred mind of the Buddha, which later inspired the Buddha's wisdom ocean to bestow the nectar of the Dharma, without which we will not be able to receive the precious teachings from the Buddha. At that time, the Buddha then said to Ananda, although you have a strong memory, it only benefits your wide learning, but your mind has not yet understood the subtle secret contemplation and illumination of shamatha. So the Buddha said that, yes, Ananda, you have a very good memory. Your memory is excellent. But Ananda, your great memory can only help you in the extensive studying. I think the extensive studying and learning include also our debate or discussion. People with great memory, they can remember the whole class without missing all the key points. Whenever I take my rounds in the after-class discussion groups, I can see that there are people who have very good memory. Even if the key contents, between the key contents, there are some metaphors given or even the joke given, the people with good memory and very good analytical mind, they would be able to know why such stories or metaphors or even jokes were mentioned over there. Their mind is not going to get disturbed by the sidetracks. Though they would not be able to remember everything completely, but Ananda could. In a sutra, there was once Ananda went to a city to beg for alms. And then at that time, there were a group of Brahmins who were sitting under a tree. At that time, they heard that the person who's coming to beg for alms is was the foremost in listening among all the disciples of the Buddha. Therefore, they started to test him and asking Ananda, well, how many leaves are there in this tree since you're so good in the wisdom? If you have such vast wisdom. And then Ananda, upon glancing at the tree, he was able to tell the numbers of leaves and branches. And then the Brahmin pointed to the other tree, saying that, can you tell how many trees and how many branches and leaves on the other tree branch? And then Ananda, after telling them the numbers, the Brahmin started to count all the leaves one by one. After a very long period of time, they realized the number is exactly as Ananda said. But then this group of Brahmin didn't want to lose, therefore they hid a portion of the branches and then asked Ananda, how many of the trees and branches and leaves are still there? And then Ananda, upon glancing, he was able to tell the exact number. That group of Brahmin then generated a great faith to Ananda and then got ordained. Afterwards, many of them attained arhathood. So through this story, we can see that Ananda has excellent memory. There are people who would think that, well, this must be a folklore. There's no way that there's someone who's very good with memory in such a way. But I think even if we were not talking about Ananda, who lived such a long period of time ago, if we look at Tesla, for example, who lived around 19th century, his memory was so excellent that he could remember all the books that he had read. On top of that, he can remember various kinds of theories and formulas and calculations very clearly in terms of engineering. And he's renowned for his contribution to the design of the modern alternating current electricity supply mechanism, and later inspired the electric cars. I think nowadays it's quite popular because the gas is so expensive nowadays. The electric car is also a better choice for people nowadays. Anyhow, not sure how I deviated to there, but I wanted to talk about Nikola Tesla is because his particular excellence in his memory and his ingenious in his invention. He's indeed considered as one of the most renowned scientists. But of course, he was the researcher in terms of the materialistic development. In terms of the spiritual development, there are a group of great masters who contributed to the advancement of spiritual development of human beings. Such kind of people like Ananda. The Buddha then said to Ananda, saying that although you have a strong memory, it only benefits your wide learning, but your mind has not yet understood the subtle secret contemplation and illumination of shamatha. Shamatha is mainly on the peaceful abiding. And the subtle secret contemplation refers to the vipassana. So those are the explanations. Over here, the Buddha said that though you're quite extensive in your study and contemplation, however, your practice of shamatha and vipassana is still not sufficient. The subtle sacred contemplation is one method of practice. And then the Buddha said that though that you're very good at study and contemplation, you contemplate very diligently, also you listen quite extensively. However, if you don't practice, then your understanding of the Dharma is still not going to be good enough. Just as the Agama Sutra says that by chanting many sutras, it's still not going to, one still won't be able to see the wondrous profundity of that Dharma, which means that if you don't practice on it, you will not be able to see the true profundity of the teaching. It is just like when someone's counting on the numbers of yaks one herds. However, those numbers of yaks doesn't necessarily belong to that person. It is not that person's property. Simply counting it, calculating it, simply listening to it, don't bring as much benefit to you as the actual practice. Therefore, I think it is indeed very important that you're listening and studying the 5 treatises and you're engaging in the after-class presentation and so on. Those are all really wonderful. But I think what's really important, the key here is that how we can apply those knowledge, how we can actually use it, and how we can merge those wisdom into our heart. This is the crucial point. I've been making that as an emphasis for many years. In the past, for many years, I've been asking everyone to practice up on the resting the mind that's composed by Longchenpa, especially the practice guidance at the 3 places. The other day, I asked a Lama who can give the oral transmission. I said it's quite crucial to have the oral transmission because not many people have the oral transmission of the guidance on the practice at the 3 places. Because each of those guidances, each of those practice guidances, they have the pre-practice and post-practice as well as the actual practice. You can practice it, you can practice 1 per day, or you can practice 1 per 3 days or 7 days. And they were explained very explicitly. If you can practice in such a way, I'm sure you're going to gain great benefit from it. Our wisdom cannot compare to that of the Anandas. But even for Ananda, the Buddha scolded him, saying that, well, you are only listening and contemplating extensively, but to put those teachings into your heart and mind, it still takes a long period of time. In the Tibetan tradition, we also say that if one were to be very knowledgeable in the dry words, can hardly moisten one's thirsting mind. It means that if one cannot take those teachings to mature one's own mind stream, then the language, the words, don't really have any power. It is not persuasive. It is just like listening to some melodious song, but it's still so far away from maturing one's mind. Therefore, I call up on all of you to practice up on all the teachings that you've received. even if it's as simple as the human birth is precious, or life is impermanent, or look for the nature of your mind, of course, that would be the best. Otherwise, if you don't practice up on it, many of you who studied all the way to the graduate master's degrees or PhDs and so on and so forth, and you started to have a certain kinds of arrogance, and then you become a person who's only studying the Dharma as a scholar and place your attention on the beauty of words, but don't use the Dharma to train your mind. In that way, you will waste your life very quickly. You squander these dozens of years very quickly. Other than that, you will not become a very good practitioner. So I hope that you can contemplate upon that. And then the Buddha said that, listen attentively now as I explain it for you in detail. The Buddha said that I will explain extensively, use various metaphors and analysis, and give you various teachings to demonstrate it for you. And then the Buddha said that, may this explanation cause all those of the future who have outflows to obtain the fruition of Bodhi. The outflows means the negative karma or negative habitual patterns, such as drinking, smoking, desire, greed, anger, all of those kinds of outflows. And then the Buddha said that these sentient beings of the future who have such outflows, may they also attain the fruition of Bodhi. I believe the majority of you who are listening right now, you're also considered as the beings with outflows. We have lots of our negative habitual patterns, which could be caused from our previous karma. For example, some of you may have more greed, some may have more laziness, some may have more jealousy. Some may have all of them. But however we are, if we were to practice according to the Buddha's teaching, then we will be able to eradicate all the afflictions, or at least to suppress it or to alleviate the vex. I'm sure everyone would be able to attain various kinds of fruitions and various kinds of benefits. And then Ananda, some said Ananda, sometimes Ananda, just like when people pronouncing Amitabha in different ways. Ananda, Buddha said that all living beings turn to the wheel of rebirth in this world. Because of two upside-down discriminating false views. Wherever these views arise, revulsion through the cycle of appropriate karma occurs. The Buddha then continued to explain by saying that, remember all the sentient beings in this samsaric world of the three realms. In the three existence, they are existing in such a way is because of the two false views. Because of the two types of false views, they will take rebirth in the cyclic existence of the six realms. And such kind of rebirth would occur again and again based on their own karma. Such force of karma is indeed really powerful. According to the collective teachings of all virtue, it says that there are two forces that's the greatest. I think the explanation on this is quite excellent. It says that the two forces, one of them is the force of karma, which could put us into the samsara of birth and death. And the other force, which is also powerful, and that force is the force of samadhi, the force of meditation. And through this force, we would be able to exit the samsaric birth and death. It is because Ananda doesn't have the force of samadhi. We are also like Ananda, who's controlled by our karmic force. Later, we will look into the two types of discrimination.
The
Buddha then continued to say that what are the two discriminating views then? The first consists of the false view based on living beings, on their individual karma. The second consists of a false view based on living beings' collective share. That is to say, the first karma is the personal individual karma, and the second one is the collective share of all sentient beings. In another word, the collective karma of sentient beings. Every one of us, we would experience based on one or both of the karma. In the experience of the phenomena of the samsara, we experience the individual karma. The individual karma is the kind of karma that is based on our five aggregates. In the continuum of the five aggregates. So this is the individual karma. What is the collective share of the karma then? What is the collective karma then? That is all the sentient beings that collectively accumulated karma. For example, the collective karma of all sentient beings, which then resulted in the inanimate world. Sometimes in the Chinese language or in the Chinese tradition, it is called the karma that sentient beings would rely on. The lay practitioners and the monastics in Larungar, they perceive this world over here, perceive it as they perceive this Larungar over here altogether. This is the collective karma. However, out of all the people over here whom have this collective share of karma and sees this inanimate world that is Larungar, there are people who perceives this Larungar as Pure Land, and there are some people who perceive it as a place that creates lots of trouble. So everyone's personal and individual experience could be very different. And then the Buddha said that what is meant by false view based on individual karma, Ananda, it is like a person in the world who has red cataracts on his eyes, so that at night he alone sees around the lamp a circle reflection composed of layers of five colors. The Buddha then further expounded on what is individual karma, and then later he will expound on the collective karma. So in terms of individual karma, if one were to have this eye illness, a type of cataracts, that person sees the lamp at night to have an aura around them. It could be lamps or it could be candles, candle lights. And then they would see this circular reflection, a circular aura around that lamp that takes various kinds of colors. This kind of perception is out of his own individual karma. In fact, the individual karma doesn't necessarily only apply to one particular individual. Sometimes it could apply to a larger group of people. For example, many people getting sick altogether. It is really a matter of taking. It is really a matter of what you would take as the reference point. To give you another example, currently there are about 500,000 refugees suffering due to the war in Ukraine. Compared to the whole world, they are suffering because of their individual karma. But in terms of all the 500,000 people as a group of refugees, then it could be considered as their collective karma. To give you another example, about 100 years ago, I heard that the Netherlands had this plague of locusts. Because of the locusts, then it resulted to famine. At the same time of having famine, clouds like locusts pour down from the sky. Someone saw that there was an old man pouring the locusts pouring down the locusts from the sky. And in many areas, the dead locusts and the locusts themselves are laying on the ground for a few inches of thickness. The whole country was filled with locusts. At the end, people had no choice but to eat the locusts as meals. And sometimes the locusts, instead of, however, out of the collective karma, sometimes the locusts would turn into feces on their table. This was recorded in historical records as well. And whenever we look at this kind of stories, we can definitely see it is because of a very special type of individual karma. Another example of individual karma is that there are people who have allotrophagia, that is the particular type of eating disorder that they would prefer to eat things such as glass and rocks. But then the Buddha then gives the example of the lamps, the circle around the light, and the lamp itself to demonstrate his teaching to Ananda. The Buddha said, "What do you think? Is the circle light that appears around the lamp at night the lamp's colors, or is it the seeing's colors?" So let's analyze the circle around the light. Is it part of the lamp's color, or is it the seeing's color? Ananda, if it is the lamp's colors, why is it that someone without the eye cataracts disease does not see the same thing, and only the one who is diseased sees the circular reflection? Over here, the Buddha first refute it is because of the lamp's color nor of the seeing's color. It is to refute of the two colors. To refute the individual appearance would be able to refute the individual karma. Therefore, the Buddha then asked Ananda by saying that, Ananda, if it's the lamp's colors, why is it that someone without disease does not see the same thing? And only the one who is diseased sees the circular reflection. So if you were to say that this is because of the colors of the lamp that one sees the circle of the lamp, then everyone should be able to see the same thing. However, only the diseased one would be able to see the circular reflection. Only the one who has the eye disease can see those circular reflection. Therefore, you cannot say that it is of the color of the lamp. That doesn't make any sense. To further analyze it, if you were to say that it is not the color of the lamp, rather it is the color of seeing, it is also not reasonable. Why is that? Then you're simply saying that the seeing has a color. The one with the disease, with the eye disease, who sees the color of the lamp, in fact, his seeing becomes colorful, becomes the color. But that doesn't make sense either. If you were to say that the color can be only perceived by the ones with the eye disease, that doesn't make any sense. Because people with eye disease or without eye disease, they all have seeing. The Buddha basically used this method of Buddhist logic to debate with Ananda. He said, well, if you were to say that this color is part of the lamp, then it doesn't make sense because everyone should be able to see it. If you were to say that it is only the color is the part of the seeing, then it doesn't make sense either. Then that means your seeing has color. These are the refutation on the two existence of colors. Now the next two is to refute on not color and not seeing, not lamp and not seeing. Moreover, Ananda, if the circular reflection is in itself a thing apart from the lamp, if you were to say that the circular reflection is other than the lamp, then it would be seen around the folding screen, the curtain, the table, and the mats. You would be able to see that circular reflection everywhere. Why is that? It is because other than lamp, you should still be able to see the circles because you come to the recognition of the circular reflection is a separate entity. Then even if it is without the lamp's illumination, you should be able to still see the circular reflections, isn't it? If it has nothing to do with the seeing, it should not be seen by the eyes. Why is it that the person with cataracts sees the circular reflections with his eyes? And then the Buddha further makes this analysis by saying that if it has nothing to do with the seeing, then it should not be seen by eyes completely. Why are you saying that someone with the cataracts would be able to see the circular reflections with his eyes? If you were to say that it has nothing to do with seeing, then how could it only correlate to the person with eye cataracts? In this way, the Buddha refuted is seeing, is light, and not seeing, not light. And then the Buddha continued to say that, therefore, you should know that, in fact, the colors come from the lamp, and the diseased seeing brings about the reflection. Both the circular reflection and the faulty seeing are the result of the cataract. But that which sees the disease film is not sick. So over here, the Buddha said that, yes, the color, though it is from the lamp, and this person who has the eye cataracts sees it and sees the circular reflection around the lamp. So there are the two factors that has already been fulfilled, the light that has the color, and then the person with eye cataracts, which are both defiled. Both the circular reflection and the faulty seeing are the result of cataract. But that which sees the disease film is not sick. According to Master Changshui's explanation, he said that, in fact, the seeing of the circular reflection is no longer of cataracts, because the circular reflection is of its character. According to Master Jiaguan and Master Ouyi, what they said is that this seeing, which is the seeing nature, is not sickness. So these are the two ways of explanation. And it could be a bit difficult to understand. It can be a bit confusing, because previously the Buddha talked about the cause and the seeing, and then the cataracts. Over here, it says that if you can see the disease, if you can see the nature of disease, then that seeing is not sick, is not disease, is not sickness. Therefore, the Buddha comes to the conclusion by summarizing this particular teaching by saying that thus you should not say that it is the lamp or the seeing, or that it is neither the lamp nor the seeing. This is a summary. So the result that we already, the result of which is that you cannot say that it is the lamp nor the seeing. And this circular reflection is not the lamp, is not the seeing. But at the same time, you cannot say that it is not light, it is not seeing. When we study Madhyamika, I believe we studied according to the teaching angle from Longchenpa, every phenomena are just like the hair. They're neither mind nor the external existence. Over here, the hair means that the hair that's perceived by people with eye disease. So they're simply the confused appearance rather than something that is truly existent. So over here, the Buddha said that, well, you cannot say that this is the circular reflection is part of the lamp nor of seeing. But you cannot say that it is not the lamp nor the cataracts or not the cataracts. It is the truth is beyond the four elaborations, the four extremes. It is part of our very special individual karma. The circular light in its nature is just like the flower in space. It doesn't have any intrinsic existence other than our individual karma. Our afflictions, in fact, it is exactly the same thing. Master Oyi also said in this part, everything is illusory. There is no intrinsic existence. Therefore, you cannot say that it is seeing, or it is not seeing, or it is the lamp, or it is not the lamp. In fact, all of our phenomena, they surpass of all the extremes. This is really one of the most profound analysis from Madhyamika. Many people really enjoy this type of analysis because it is not difficult because this is easy for the modern people to accept, as this is only logical analysis. It is not of any domain of religion. By going through this analysis, it is simple for us to see that the circular light is neither the lamp nor the seeing, nor not the lamp, nor not the seeing. Now you can contemplate on this particular angle of the Buddha and see if you can win the debate, if you were to debate with the Buddha. It must be quite difficult. Now let's continue with the next example. The Buddha then said that it's like a second moon, often seen when one presses on one's eye while looking up in the sky. It is neither substantial nor a reflection because it is an illusory vision caused by pressure exerted to one's eye. So whenever we look into the sky and look at the moon itself, there is no way that there is a second moon. But if you were to press your eyes, then you would be able to see a second moon. At that time, the wise ones, a wise person should not say that the second moon is a form or not a form. There is no way to describe it as that. It is simply a cause and condition. You're simply contributing to exert pressure onto your eyes, but it is simply an illusory vision caused by that pressure. Therefore, a wise person would not say that the second moon is a form or not a form. From the point of view of describing of the object, when you look at the two moons, you would not be able to find the form or not form of that moon, of the second moon. From the point of view of the subject, when you talk about the seeing that sees the two moons, you cannot say that it is because of that you're seeing can part from the two moons, nor can you say that it is not the seeing that sees the two moons. Therefore, when it comes to the second moon, when it comes to the two moons, you would be able to understand that everything that manifested because of the individual karma are based on our individual five aggregates. Just like how the second moon would appear exactly the same as the first moon. In fact, it is based on a cause and condition. But this cause and condition has nothing to do with the moon itself. We constantly think that the true moon there is a true moon that manifested the second moon, and the second moon is the one that that deceives us and started to describe the second moon, the color of it, the shape of it, the size of it, and kept on thinking about the second moon. But the second moon had never existed. There is no color, no shape, and no movement. It doesn't have any intrinsic existence because the second moon does not have an existent entity. It had never been formed. It has never existed. Therefore, talking about the second moon is simply talking about delusion. It is simply talking about the moon that is manufactured through our dualistic mind. This is a teaching combined with the second moon. Hence, the Buddha then combined both of the illusion created by the eyes from the cataracts and the seeing the circle of the lamp, also the moon. He said that it is the same with the illusion created by the diseased eyes. You cannot say it is from the lamp or from the seeing. Even less can it be said not to be from the lamp or the seeing. Through this metaphor, now we would be able to see that the various kinds of suffering and happiness based on the individual karma of the sentient beings, what you would think that it's real, in fact, it cannot be experienced by others. It is just like a person with eye cataracts. His experience is completely different than the others. Therefore, the eye cataracts points to the individual karma. Once this person's eye cataracts is cured, then he would no longer see the circular reflection of the lamp anymore. Similarly, when a person's individual karma has dissipated or has disappeared, then there is no confused display of happiness or sadness anymore. So through the explanation of the circular reflection, we will be able to understand how individual karma influence the experience of the sentient beings. Now let's continue to talk about the second aspect, though it's probably going to take a little bit longer, but I think that's okay. The second aspect is about the collective karma. The Buddha continued to say that what is meant by the false view of the collective karma, the collective share, Ananda in Jambudvipa, besides the waters of the great seas, there is level land that forms some 3,000 continents, east and west, throughout the entire expanse of the great continent. The Buddha started to give the example of Jambudvipa, saying that if there's, for example, in Jambudvipa, other than the salted water oceans, there are various other continents numbering 3,000, east and west, throughout the entire expanse of the great continent. There are 2,300 large countries. In the other smaller continents in the seas, there may be 200 or 300 countries, or perhaps 1 or 2, or perhaps 30, 40, or 50. So the Buddha started giving the example that there's a large continent in the center, and then in that large continent, there is a large country. There are 3,000 large countries. Back at that time in India, many of the smaller, very small countries are counted as countries, just as in the now Garzi County in Sichuan province, they used to be divided into small countries. For example, there's Garo, there's various other places nowadays is considered as part of a county, used to be countries. Maybe it was the same for India. The Buddha said that in that continent, then there are 2,300 countries. And in some smaller continents, there are 200, 300 countries. Now, in our world, we have 197 countries, out of which 193 are part of the United Nations. I believe that was the number about 2 years ago. Not sure what's the current number now. When we look at the continent of Africa, there are 54, and in Asia, there are 39. So in this world, there are so many countries. At that time, the Buddha said that, Ananda, within this amount of countries and continents, there is one small continent which has only 2 countries. In the oceanic, I believe there are 16 countries in the oceanic continent. New Zealand, Australia, and some of the smaller countries only have about tens of thousands of people. That's all the population they have. So some countries, they have very small amount of population. Maybe similar to that, there are 2 small countries. Ananda supposed that among them there is one small continent where there are only 2 countries. The people of just one of the countries together experience evil conditions. The not auspicious experiences. On that small continent, all the people of that country sees all kinds of inauspicious things. Perhaps they see 2 suns, perhaps they see 2 moons with circles, or a dark haze, or girdle ornaments around them. So those are considered as evil omens. I believe according to Confucius, he also said that just as how people should not have 2 kings to rule them, the sky doesn't have 2 suns. So in his consideration, to have 2 suns or 2 moons are not considered as a good omen. They're not very auspicious. And then dark haze, girdle ornaments around them, or comets, shooting stars, ears on the sun or moon, rainbows, secondary rainbows, and various other evil signs. According to the commentary of Fingers and the Palm on Surangama Sutra, it says that the various colors that's associated with the haze around the sun, they could be signals on the possible inauspicious events happening on the world. For example, some of the inauspicious haze like black or blue or red. Whenever the haze is red, it could be a sign for fire, and when it's black, it could be a sign for a great amount of rain or even tsunami. When it is blue, then it is a sign for great wind. In the Tibetan translation, it says that the sunlight is like hooks. Sometimes some particular types of special light or clouds, they are not considered as auspicious. And then comets, shooting stars, years on the sun or moon, some of those are translated and explained separately. Some of the particular Chinese characters are explained more close together. The comets sometimes are considered as inauspicious. To have comets, people would feel that certain kinds of catastrophe might happen. For example, in my hometown, before the great earthquake back in the 70s, many of the seniors felt that seeing so many comets signals inauspicious events in the next year. And indeed, back in the 70s, I think 70-something, then there was a great earthquake that happened around that area. In Tibet, we though have this tradition of seeing rainbows means auspicious. However, there are rainbows, they would face different ways, or their shapes are different. When they are curving down, those kinds of rainbows signals inauspiciousness. Throughout history, we can see that whenever there are some unusual natural signs that happens in the world, let it be the weather, let it be the stars or the moon and the sun or the clouds, whenever those kinds of very unique signs shows, then some great changes would happen in this world. If in particular country were to see those kinds of inauspicious signs, then it is a signal for that country to practice virtuous things, to practice some great virtuous things altogether. That is quite important. At that time, if the whole country were to make such a good change altogether based on the law of causes and conditions, those inauspicious karma can still be reverted. Then the Buddha continued to say that only the people in that country sees them. The living beings in the other country from the first do not see or hear anything unusual. Or originally, these two countries are living next to each other, they should be able to see it. But if their karma are very different, if one of the country, if the first country that has the inauspicious signs, they would go through famine and war and all kinds of plague and so on, the second country don't see it at all. In terms of our current pandemic, there are various predictions given. Some, for example, based on the prediction, giving prediction through astrology, they would say that the pandemic will start to get better after June. Let's just wait and see if their predictions are correct or not. And then maybe they would say that, oh no, there's another comic that's coming back, so so it's still not going to get better. We'll have to see how it goes. Anyhow, when one country is going through a common collective karma through the inauspicious periods of time, the other country probably don't see anything that's inauspicious at all. They would probably live very happily. Let's stop here today.